It is not food that makes you lose money every year, but a small number that makes you afraid in the wrong place. In the United States, billions of dollars of food are thrown away every year, not because it is spoiled, but because people misunderstand the meaning of expiration dates. The scariest thing in the kitchen is not when the refrigerator is empty, but when there is still food inside and you no longer dare to eat it. You open the refrigerator. Everything still looks normal. No strange smell, no sign of spoilage, only a very small line of text. Expired yesterday. And in just a few seconds, a dish that could still be safe suddenly becomes something thrown away. Not because it is dangerous, but because you trust the number more than you trust your own senses. That small action is repeating every day in millions of kitchens. Money disappears silently. Food is discarded in silence. While the truth is very simple, expiration dates mostly speak about best quality, not the boundary between safety and danger. And sometimes, what makes people waste the most food is not bacteria, but the fear of a number. Today, we will slow down to understand what is really happening in our own kitchen, where very small daily decisions can quietly change money, habits, and even the way we look at food. 1. Expiration dates were not created for safety. For most of human history, food did not have expiration dates. People relied only on very simple things: their eyes, their sense of smell, and lived experience. If milk had a strange smell, they would not drink it. If meat changed color, they would not eat it. If vegetables became slimy, they would throw them away. Every decision was direct, natural, and needed no number to confirm it. But entering the 20th century, a major change took place. Food began to be mass-produced, transported across very long distances, and placed on supermarket shelves for many days before reaching the buyer. From that moment on, trust no longer came from personal experience, but had to come from packaging. And at that exact point, date numbers began to appear. What is important to understand is this. At the beginning, these numbers were not created to say when food becomes dangerous. They were only meant to indicate when a product reaches its best quality. The system of dating based on optimal quality became widespread around the 1970s, when the modern supermarket model expanded rapidly and supply chains grew longer than ever before. Its purpose was very clear: to ensure a good experience for the buyer and to reduce legal risk for the manufacturer. In other words, this was the language of quality, not the language of toxicity. However, over time, that original meaning was gradually misunderstood. People began to trust the number more than their own senses. A carton of milk that still smells fresh can be poured away simply because it is past the date. A loaf of bread that is still edible becomes something suspicious only because of the number printed on the package. No longer perfect slowly came to mean no longer safe. That small misunderstanding has created very large consequences. Every year, millions of tons of still edible food are thrown away, not because they are dangerous, but simply because they are no longer perfect. And from that moment, food is no longer decided by smell or texture, but by an indifferent number printed long before we open the refrigerator. Perhaps for many years now, what we have truly feared is not spoiled food, but the fear printed in advance on the packaging. 2. The truth. Few people know about the law. Many people believe that the numbers printed on food packaging are the result of a strict legal system, where every standard is tightly controlled to protect public health. But when looking deeper into the actual structure, what appears instead is a gap that very few people notice. In the United States, most food circulating on the market is not required by federal law to carry expiration dates. The nearly only exception is infant formula, because this product group is directly tied to life-sustaining nutritional needs during the most fragile stage of human development. So the date in this case truly carries tightly controlled safety meaning. For most other foods, the decision about timing belongs to the manufacturers themselves. They conduct storage testing, microbiological analysis, sensory evaluation, and monitor quality decline over time to determine when a product leaves its optimal state. However, to minimize legal risk and protect brand image, companies often choose a time point more cautious than actually necessary. Because of that, the number on the package often reflects the limit of liability more than the true biological limit of the food. At this seemingly technical point, a quiet social mechanism begins to form. When the printed date is understood as an absolute boundary rather than a guide to quality, consumer behavior gradually shifts into a defensive state. Instead of checking the food, people check the number. Instead of evaluating with their senses, they search for certainty in a pre-existing symbol. And when that certainty disappears, the most familiar decision appears. Throw it away and buy new. In the United States, many studies show that each household may waste thousands of dollars of food every year, while a significant portion of discarded food is still safe to use. What is notable is that this system operates almost perfectly. It does not need force, does not need loud warnings, yet still leads millions of people to voluntarily throw away what they have just bought. It is important to understand that this mechanism was not created with the intention of causing waste. It comes from the need to maintain consistency in industrial production and to minimize risk within a complex legal environment. But when scientific information is reduced to a single number, the distance between the original intention and the way society interprets it begins to widen. A tool designed to guide quality is gradually understood as a signal of danger. From there, a new consumption habit forms, throwing away before checking, replacing before it is truly necessary, and searching for a sense of safety in the act of buying again. And from that moment, eating is no longer based only on biological need. It begins to be influenced by a very modern fear, printed on the packaging yet more powerful than the food inside. What makes you waste the most food is not bacteria, but the fear of a number. 3. The 3 date labels that cause the greatest confusion. Not everything called an expiration date carries the same meaning, but for consumers, they are often grouped into a single idea: danger after the printed day. This simplification turns 3 completely different date labels into the source of one of the most common misunderstandings in modern life. Best before actually refers only to the moment when quality is at its best, according to the manufacturer's standard. After this point, food may gradually lose flavor, crispness, color, or original texture, but in most cases, it remains safe if stored properly. This is a date label connected to sensory experience, not a health warning. Sell-by goes even further away from the question of safety. This label is designed mainly for the retail system, helping stores manage inventory, rotate products, and ensure that goods remain fresh on the shelf. It is an operational tool of supermarkets, not a warning for buyers. But when that number appears in front of consumers, the original meaning almost disappears, leaving only the feeling that time is counting down. Use by is the rare date label that comes closest to a true safety point, often applied to highly perishable foods such as fresh meat, fish, milk, or products with high microbial risk. However, even here, the printed date is still strongly influenced by assumed storage conditions and legal safety margins. Rather than a biological rule, that makes food become dangerous right after midnight. But in everyday life, most people do not distinguish between these layers of meaning. They see only one message, short and frightening. Expired means dangerous. That very small misunderstanding is creating an entire system. It not only causes food to be discarded earlier than necessary, but also quietly changes how people perceive risk, making a number on the package weigh more than smell, texture, and the real signs of spoilage. And when trust in direct experience is replaced by trust in ready-made symbols, the relationship between humans and food also begins to change in a deep way that few people notice. Sometimes, what we need is not another new number, but learning to trust again the very senses that have protected humans for thousands of years. So the next time you are about to throw away a dish only because of the printed date on the package, will you trust that number or trust yourself? 4. Food does not spoil instantly. Food does not operate like a switch. It does not move from safe to dangerous in the single moment the clock passes midnight. In the biological world, every change happens gradually, quietly, and always leaves signs before becoming obvious. The spoilage of food is the same. It is a slow process in which bacteria increase over time. Cellular structure weakens little by little, moisture shifts, and flavor gently moves away from its original state. These changes rarely happen suddenly. Most occur slowly enough for humans to recognize through very familiar signals. Before any number on the package becomes important, food has usually already sent its own warning. A sour smell appears. Color begins to fade. The surface becomes unusually slimy or dry. Spots of mold form in the most humid areas. This is not random, but the natural language of biology. The way food reveals that its life cycle is gradually closing. For thousands of years before supermarkets, sealed packaging, or modern cold chains existed, humans survived by reading these simple signals. Smell, sight, and taste were not only tools of experience, but also a safety warning system evolved to protect the body from real danger. Today, when the printed number on packaging becomes more familiar than the true smell or taste of food, trust in those natural signals slowly weakens. Not because they are less accurate, but because we are increasingly less encouraged to listen. However, understanding this does not mean that time can be ignored. Some highly perishable foods still carry microbial risk before sensory signs appear, especially when stored improperly. Therefore, what matters is not ignoring dates, but clearly distinguishing between quality decline and real safety risk. When we see food as a living process rather than a fixed moment in time, the way we make decisions also begins to change. And from that very small shift, a larger question gradually emerges. If food does not spoil instantly as we once believed, what is truly creating millions of tons of discarded food every year? The answer, perhaps, lies in the most familiar place, inside the kitchen of every home. 5. Things that almost never spoil. Some foods can last almost indefinitely if stored properly. Honey, vinegar, dried beans, soy sauce. Not because they are immune to time, but because the environment inside them nearly prevents bacterial growth. Extremely low moisture keeps microorganisms from multiplying. High acidity slows natural decomposition. Dense concentrations of sugar or salt create a space where most living organisms cannot survive. Time still passes, but spoilage almost stands still. From here, a very simple truth begins to appear. Not every food truly has the concept of expiration. In a comment beneath a previous video, an older viewer wrote that he had kept a jar of honey for more than 10 years in his small kitchen. and every winter he still used it as usual. That story does not carry scientific language, yet it reflects exactly what science has long confirmed. Some foods are far more resilient than the number printed on their packaging. Yet in modern life, just one small printed day is enough to make many people hesitate. Not because the food has changed, but because the feeling of safety has changed. And when reassurance becomes tied to a number rather than reality, the most familiar choice is often to throw it away to avoid risk. When those seemingly very small decisions repeat millions of times each day, they are no longer small. The amount of discarded food gradually increases, while its true value has not disappeared at all. The story, therefore, is no longer only about individual foods, but becomes a larger story about how we understand time, understand safety, and understand the value of what is quietly present in our own kitchen. I once read a very short comment under an old video. A man wrote that he was 72 years old, not seriously ill, no accident. Only for many years, he was always afraid of eating food past the date. He threw away many things that were still edible. Milk just one day past, bread slightly dry, a cup of yogurt that still smelled fresh. Each time like that, he thought he was being careful. But a few years later, when looking back at savings that had slowly run out because living costs kept rising, he realized something very quiet. Perhaps what he lost was not health, but thousands of small decisions made in fear. He ended the comment with a very simple sentence. "I wish I had learned to trust my nose earlier, instead of trusting the number on the lid." There was no drama, no great tragedy, just an ordinary life, and a lesson that arrived a little late. But sometimes, quiet stories like that speak most clearly about what we are overlooking every day. 6. The hidden side of marketing. By the 1990s, some food companies began adding gentle-sounding phrases on packaging such as "best taste before." Technically, this statement is not directly related to safety. It is only meant to ensure that users experience the product at its best flavor according to brand standards. But in the modern consumer world, the true meaning of a sentence does not lie in what it says, but in the feeling it creates. When consumers see a point in time tied to best flavor, the moment after that point is easily interpreted as an invisible decline. No longer at its best slowly becomes understood as no longer good enough. And when the feeling of good enough disappears, the most familiar choice appears. Buy new for reassurance. That cycle happens quietly, repeating every day, until almost no one notices they are being guided by a very small line of text. No persuasion is needed. Only a feeling must be planted. Modern marketing rarely operates through direct words. It shapes expectations before consumers have time to ask questions, turning a neutral signal into an almost automatic buying decision. People no longer check smell or taste before throwing food away, but check the number. And once the number has passed, the decision seems to have been made in advance. From a business perspective, this mechanism helps protect brand image, maintain consistent quality, and reduce the risk of complaints. But from a social perspective, it also quietly creates a new habit, replacing before it is truly necessary. When that habit repeats long enough, it becomes normal to the point that it is no longer questioned. And in that very quiet place, the boundary between real need and created need begins to blur. When this happens with food, something directly tied to daily survival, its consequences do not stop at shopping, but expand into a larger story of excess and waste quietly forming within modern life. 7. When fear becomes habit. What is most notable does not lie in the numbers printed on packaging, but in how they gradually change human behavior over time. When a small decision is repeated long enough, it is no longer a choice. It becomes a reflex. Look at the printed date. Feel uneasy. Throw it away. Buy new. That cycle happens so quickly that almost no one realizes they have just made a decision. And at this point, the story no longer belongs to food. It becomes a story of psychology. Humans always seek certainty in a world full of invisible risks, and a specific number provides a stronger sense of control than any natural sign. Even when smell remains normal, even when texture has not changed, even when there is no real sign of spoilage. Once the number has passed, the feeling of safety leaves with it. Fear rarely appears loudly. It grows through very small decisions. Over time, those small decisions accumulate into a new consumption habit, where reassurance is purchased through constant replacement. Not because it is necessary, but because the feeling of uncertainty becomes more uncomfortable than waste. And when millions of people act the same way every day, the result is no longer an individual choice, but a social pattern. Within that pattern, food loses its original role. Instead of being seen as nourishment that deserves respect, it gradually becomes a temporary product, always waiting to be replaced. Value no longer lies in full use, but in the ability to buy again at any time. Excess, therefore, no longer surprises anyone. It becomes the new normal. But when something abnormal becomes normal for long enough, the most important question begins to appear. If we are throwing away too many things that are still usable, what is the true cost of that waste? Not only money, not only food, but also the way we perceive the value of what nourishes us every day. And to fully understand that cost, we must step outside the familiar kitchen and look at the larger picture of the world, where food waste is no longer a personal story, but one of the greatest paradoxes of the modern age. 8. The global food waste crisis. When looking beyond the familiar kitchen of each household, the picture begins to change completely. Very small decisions, throwing away a carton of milk, leaving behind a loaf of bread, replacing a meal that is still usable, when repeated millions of times each day, are no longer personal matters. They become a global phenomenon. Today, it is estimated that nearly 1/3 of all food produced in the world is being wasted. That does not only mean food is discarded. It also means the water used for cultivation, the land that has been exploited, the energy that has been consumed, and the labor of countless people. All are left behind as well, quietly, like the very bags of food waste tied shut each night. The paradox lies here. While billions of tons of food are thrown away every year, hundreds of millions of people around the world still do not have enough to eat each day. The two realities exist side by side, yet rarely touch, not because the world lacks food, but because the way we produce, distribute, and consume is moving along different trajectories. This is no longer a problem of food. This is a problem of how humans perceive value. A small number printed on packaging can cause a meal to be discarded earlier than necessary. A standard of perfect freshness can make still safe foods become invisible on relief shelves, and a consumption habit that seems harmless when multiplied on a global scale can create enormous pressure on the environment, the economy, and even our own food future. What is worth thinking about is that this crisis does not begin with large decisions. It begins with very quiet choices, happening every day in the most familiar spaces: the family kitchen, the supermarket cart, the refrigerator opened and then closed. There is no warning sound, no dramatic moment, only repetition, long enough to become normal. And perhaps the most important question is not how much food the world is wasting, but how much value we are wasting before we even realize it. Because when a society becomes accustomed to throwing away what is still usable, what is ultimately lost may not be only food, but the very ability to appreciate what sustains us each day. And from here, the story returns to the closest point. Not how the world will change, but how each of us will choose differently, starting from the very next meal. 9. Human senses, the forgotten tool. Before supermarkets existed, before transparent plastic packaging and numbers printed on labels, humans had only one system of inspection: their own senses. Smell, color, texture, signals that were simple yet refined enough to protect life across thousands of years of history. Today, a paradox appears. We live in an age with more information than ever before, yet we trust a small number on packaging more than our own nose. The decision to keep or throw away a food item is often made in just a few seconds, not based on direct experience, but on a symbol printed in advance. But the biological truth of food has not changed. When food truly spoils, it is rarely silent. A sour smell appears. Color shifts. The surface becomes unusually slimy or dry. Those signs existed long before humans invented expiration date systems. What is gradually disappearing is not the ability to recognize, but the habit of listening to our own bodies. As that habit fades, humans become more dependent on external systems, even in the smallest decisions of everyday life. And sometimes, losing a skill that's small reflects a much larger change in the way we live. 10. A future without expiration dates? In recent years, some supermarket chains in the United Kingdom have begun experimenting with removing printed dates from fresh produce in order to reduce unnecessary food waste. Instead of relying on numbers, they encourage shoppers to directly observe the real condition of the product, returning to a very old, yet very natural human way of evaluation. This may be only a small change in the retail industry. It may also be an early sign of a larger trend, where society begins to question consumption habits that have seemed obvious for decades. Whether that trend will spread remains uncertain. Mass production systems, legal responsibility, and risk aversion psychology make change slow. But even if the numbers on packaging continue to exist, something more important is gradually being remembered. The final responsibility has never belonged to manufacturers or supermarkets. It has always belonged to the person holding the food in their hands. And perhaps the real question of the future is not when food expires, but whether we still remember how to recognize it ourselves. In the end, what matters most may not lie in the numbers printed on packaging, but in how we understand food, understand our habits, and understand what truly needs to be kept. Expiration dates are not the boundary between safety and danger. In many cases, they are only markers of best quality. The final decision has always belonged to you, your eyes, your sense of smell, and the ordinary caution of being human. When we understand that correctly, we do not only reduce the waste of money and food, we also regain something more important: calm within our own kitchen. And sometimes, living calmly among very small things each day is already a way to protect a longer future than any number printed on packaging.